The Bible reading for today comes from Matthew 26, 36 to 45. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Heavenly Father, allow us to enter the sacred with you today. Help us to not fall asleep like the disciples did, but instead to be with you in the Garden of Gethsemane. You drank the cup that God prepared for you. You are amazing. Amen. In the Hebrew Bible, a cup often means what God assigns to someone, their portion, their destiny, or experience. "The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup," Psalm 16:5. This can be positive, but also devastating. So when Jesus speaks of this cup, he's talking about what God has placed before him to receive. During the Passover festival in Jewish tradition, there are 4 cups of wine that are drunk to symbolize the salvation of God. That's taken from Exodus 6:6-7. The cup of sanctification is the first one. "I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians." This is drunk at the beginning of the central meal of Passover. The cup of deliverance. "I will free you from being slaves." This is drunk after the retelling of the Exodus story. At this point, the youngest person is tasked with asking questions that further reveals God's purpose. The cup of redemption is next. "I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty acts of judgment." This is drunk after the lamb has been eaten. It is the blessing after the meal. This is likely the cup that Jesus was sharing at the Last Supper when he says, "Drink of it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." The fourth cup is the cup of praise or completion. This is drunk at the very end. It usually has songs of praise, songs of hope, as all gathered are looking ahead to God's fulfilled kingdom. Interestingly, Jesus doesn't share the cup of praise during the Last Supper. Instead, he says, "I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." So Jesus broke from tradition here. He didn't use the normal blessings, instead referring to himself, his own body, his blood. And then finally, he didn't share the cup of praise. We know why, of course. It is because Jesus is about to drink the ultimate cup of suffering, and thereby bring in the new covenant, the ultimate cup of completion. The disciples must have been perplexed, though, at the Last Supper. There is a celebration that happens with the cup of praise, yet Jesus didn't drink it. Perhaps in a silly way, it is like celebrating a birthday and gearing yourself up for the celebratory song of happy birthday, which doesn't happen. The disciples would have been confused, perhaps disappointed. In Jewish tradition, the end of the Passover festival is deliberately unhurried and reflective. Guests stayed long into the night. It was no different from this for this special night. Hours pass, and then Jesus suggests an evening stroll through the gardens of Gethsemane. So Jesus had just ritualized the first 3 cups of Passover, and he knows now what is coming. This final cup is approaching fast, and Jesus asks, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet, not as I will, but as you will." Later in Matthew's Gospel, he asks again, "My Father, if it's not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Meanwhile, the disciples are sleepy. They don't understand what Jesus is talking about. It is the cool of the evening, likely 10 to 14 degrees. They would have been glad to have their cloaks with them. They had just eaten a very big meal, likely including roast lamb, chicken, rice dishes, potato google, which I don't know what that is, fish, stuffed vegetables, and herb-heavy salads. For dessert, they likely had an assortment of flourless cakes and maybe some macaroons, who knows. And at the minimum, they have each had 3 cups of wine, as per the ceremony, but likely much more than this. So the disciples are full. They have likely drunk the equivalent of 1 to 2 bottles of wine each, and now they are reclining in the Garden of Gethsemane as Jesus wanders a bit away, seemingly talking to some olive trees. So they fall asleep. Jesus finds them this way and is angry and annoyed. "Couldn't you stay awake for an hour? Are you still so clueless to what is actually going on here?" I've always wondered how the disciples could be so dense. I get that they've eaten a lot, drunk a lot too, but Jesus has left some pretty big clues. He has told them all that he would be betrayed by one of them. He has seriously reconstructed the Passover feast celebration, injecting new meaning into different stages and putting off the last stage entirely, saying, "I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it anew with you in the kingdom of heaven." The disciples know that he's talking about the cup of completion here, the final act of God bringing his people into his kingdom. Jesus tells them even more, saying, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." So, why on God's green earth did the disciples fall asleep? One of my favourite Christian scientists is Ian McGilchrist. He has done extensive research into the brain. You may know that we have 2 hemispheres in the brain, the left and the right. But get rid of any notion you might have that the left side is more logical and the right side more creative. That isn't how it works. They can both be logical, and the left side can sometimes be more creative than the right. Essentially, the left sees the world as something to be grasped and used, whilst the right side sees it as something to be encountered and understood. An analogy might be, the left side of the brain allows you to find water in a forest and drink it from the stream, but it is the right side that is making sure you are safe from predators while you do so. The left side of the brain also makes stuff up. There's a really cool experiment that Ian did with people who had a condition called split brain. And it usually occurs when people undergo a surgical procedure called, and I might get this wrong, corpus callosotomy, which severs the hemispheres of the brain so they can't communicate like normal between the 2 hemispheres. It is usually done for patients who have severe epilepsy, and it's usually done as a last resort. In the experiment, the patient is told to comply with all instructions, okay? And now what is fascinating about this too is that the left eye is actually wired to the right hemisphere of the brain and the right eye to the left. In addition to this, all of the language centers of the brain are all in the left hemisphere. So, in this experiment, without using words or language, the patient is given an instruction only to the right hemisphere. That's done by covering the right eye, which is connected to the left, and a quick image is flashed to the left eye, which depicts a person getting up and going to the door. Now, the patient is already prepped to be ready to obey any instructions, and these are pretty clear. They understand quickly what the image is trying to communicate to them, and up they go and promptly go to the door. The researchers then ask them a question while they're standing there. Now remember, using language is governed by the left hemisphere of the brain. They ask, "Why did you go to the door?" The patient then tells the researchers very confidently, "Because I was thirsty, I'm going to get a drink," or "Because I was cold and I'm going to get my jacket." What is so interesting is that the left hemisphere had no idea why they went to the door, but it was very confident in making up a reason why. In Ian McGilchrist's book, The Matter of Things, he says, one of the characteristics of the left hemisphere is that it has no sense of the limits of its own understandings. It doesn't know what it is it doesn't know. It has a set worldview or framework, and it interprets everything in those terms. If it doesn't fit within that schema, it is called nonsense. Or said more simply, the left side of the brain thinks it knows everything, but it doesn't realize what it's missing. It looks at the world through a fixed lens, and anything that doesn't fit that lens gets ignored or dismissed as meaningless. For those of us who live in the West, Australia, America, England, and so on, we are living in a world that is increasingly dominated by the left hemisphere thinking. We are told that if we can't measure something, it can't exist. If something can't be quantified by science, then it didn't happen. We are so caught up in thinking this way, just like the person with a split brain, that if something doesn't make sense to us, or we are unaware of something, we just make up reasons why we do it, or we discount it entirely. No doubt, you have all been in a conversation like this before. It might be with your partner, your child, someone at work, or someone you encountered at a New Year's party. Perhaps you were talking about something really important, maybe about God or the purpose of the universe, something big. And you see their eyes glaze over. Perhaps they apologize and say, "All that stuff doesn't make sense to me," or something like that, and they move on to another conversation that better fits their worldview. But here's the rub. We do the same thing in Christian circles all the time. In October 2025, a doctrinal statement on the ordination of women was approved. As a result, we had a split in the Lutheran Church. Each side is convinced that they are right and the other is wrong. Each side is convinced that they are acting according to God's will. So why did the disciples fall asleep that fateful night in Gethsemane? I believe it is because they didn't understand what Jesus was doing or saying. They were still convinced that Jesus was going to overthrow the Romans and install himself as king. So when Jesus tells them he is about to be betrayed, that the shepherd is about to be cut down, they allowed left brain thinking to ignore it completely. It didn't fit with their worldview, so they could easily ignore it and fall asleep rather than keeping watch with Jesus. Jesus expected more from his disciples that night. But he didn't expect them to understand everything that was happening. After all, Jesus didn't understand it all entirely either. Jesus asked for the cup to be taken away. But then he goes on to say something so profound. And here I like the New Living Translation of Matthew 26:39. "Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." There is something so incredibly sacred in these words. Jesus understood more about the world and how it worked than anybody did. And so here in the garden that evening, when even Jesus was at the edge of his own understanding, perhaps Even his own human left brain was grappling to make sense of it and failing. What does he do? He didn't discount it. He didn't ignore it. He didn't pretend it wasn't happening and fall asleep like so many of his disciples. No, he set his face to the ground and said to God, "Not my will, but yours." This is what it means to worship, to enter into the sacred space with God. Ian McGilchrist, who I mentioned before, has this wonderful line in his book. To be human, in my view, is to feel a deep gravitational pull towards something ineffable that, if we can just for once get beyond words and reasons, is a matter of experience and to which we reach out silently, though not without misgivings. Something outside our conceptual grasp, but nonetheless present to us through intimations that come to us from a whole range of unfathomable experiences we call spiritual. This has been true of humanity the world over and throughout time, and is true now as much as ever. No advance in science can have anything to say about it one way or the other. To think that it could is to misunderstand science as much as spirituality. I think that to worship and enter into the sacred means setting aside your left brain certainty. It means deciding to doubt all of the doctrines and dogmas that you've built to make sense of the world, and to say to God, I don't know anything for sure, except that I want your will to be done, not mine. Blessings to you all for 2026. As the year begins, resist the temptation to think you know the answers, and instead be like Jesus, who bowed before God, face flat to the ground in the Garden of Gethsemane, and declares, not my will, but yours be done. I've specifically chosen the next song, Here I Am to Worship, as a poem of worship. Poetry and song is actually governed by the right side of the brain. Why is a sunset beautiful? Why does a poem speak to us so much? You can't measure why. It makes no sense why you might be captivated by a painting. In the same way, the feeling of worshipping God through song can't be quantified either. So as the song plays for you now, allow yourself to experience it. Allow yourself to feel the beauty of it. You are entering the sacred.